Charlie Kirk's name flashed across headlines, but it was the hooded man in the blurred photographs, labeled only as a person of interest, who gripped the nation with fear, his shadowy figure igniting a mystery more chilling than the sniper's bullet itself. The nation woke to chaos when the story broke. News anchors struggled to maintain composure as they repeated the same startling detail: photos of a potential suspect tied to the Charlie Kirk sniper incident had been released to the public. The pictures, grainy yet chilling, showed a man with a hood pulled low over his face, walking briskly through a crowded parking lot just minutes before the attack. His hands were buried deep in his pockets, his posture tense, his stride deliberate. Though his features were partially obscured, there was something unsettling in the way he moved, as though he knew he was being watched but didn't care. Within hours, the images were plastered across television screens, newspapers, and social media feeds, igniting a frenzy of speculation. People across the country became amateur detectives overnight, zooming in on the blurry frames and analyzing the suspect's shoes, his jacket, even the angle of his chin. Was he the shooter or simply a bystander caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? Officials didn't release his name, calling him only a person of interest, but that title alone was enough to cast suspicion like a shadow. The man's anonymity added to the sense of danger. If no one knew who he was, then he could be anywhere. The attack itself had already left the public shaken. A high-powered rifle fired from an elevated rooftop had sent shockwaves through the crowd at the event. The bullet struck near the stage, missing its intended target by inches, but sparking panic and chaos among attendees. People ran for cover as sirens wailed and security forces scrambled to respond. That no one was killed was considered a miracle, but the fact that a sniper had come so close to carrying out a deadly act raised terrifying questions. How had the shooter chosen the spot? How had he escaped so quickly without being seen? And why had he targeted such a prominent figure? By the time the photographs were released, the story was no longer just about the attack itself, but about the mysterious figure now at its center. Social media exploded with theories, some insisting the man was part of a larger plot, others claiming he was a scapegoat designed to distract the public from the truth. Hashtags trended worldwide, and every news outlet rushed to provide exclusive coverage, even when facts were scarce. The man in the hooded sweatshirt had become a symbol of fear and uncertainty, an enigma fueling conspiracy theories and late-night debates. In neighborhoods far from the scene of the crime, people locked their doors earlier than usual, scanning the faces of strangers at gas stations and grocery stores, wondering if they had unknowingly passed the suspect. Tips poured into hotlines from across the country, most of them dead ends, yet each call reflected the same unease spreading like wildfire. This was not just another crime story, it was a national obsession. And at the center of it all stood a hooded figure whose identity, motives, and whereabouts remained unknown, leaving the country trapped in suspense, waiting for the next move in a game no one fully understood. Investigators arrived at the rooftop within minutes of the gunfire, but the shooter had already vanished. What they found instead was a scene that seemed both rushed and carefully orchestrated. Bullet casings were neatly scattered near the edge, as if deliberately placed rather than carelessly dropped. A folded tarp, still warm from the heat of the rifle barrel, rested in a corner as if it had been prepared to conceal the weapon. The sniper had left no fingerprints, no obvious DNA, nothing that could immediately link him to the crime. It was the kind of precision that suggested planning far beyond a single attack. Security footage from surrounding buildings painted a frustratingly incomplete picture. One camera captured the shadow of a man climbing down a fire escape, his movements quick but not panicked. Another showed him walking calmly down a back alley, blending into the crowd with such ease that he seemed to dissolve into the city itself. By the time law enforcement tried to track him further, the trail had gone cold. The streets were busy, filled with onlookers and panicked citizens fleeing the chaos. In that noise and confusion, he had slipped away as if he had been waiting for that exact moment. Witnesses described him in vague terms, each account contradicting the last. To some, he was tall and broad, his presence commanding. To others, he was lean and forgettable, a face that would never stand out. It was this very inconsistency that disturbed the investigators the most. Either the suspect was a master of disguise, or he had deliberately chosen clothing and posture that made him nearly impossible to identify. Ordinary people pass by us every day unnoticed, and that ordinariness was his most dangerous weapon. As detectives dug deeper, they realized the sniper had not chosen his perch randomly. The rooftop offered a clear, unobstructed view of the stage, while also providing multiple escape routes. The building itself was partly abandoned, its top floors closed to the public. Security patrols in the area were minimal, giving him ample time to set up his position. Whoever he was, he had studied the area with the eye of a professional. This was not a reckless act, but a demonstration of cold, practiced patience. The media seized on these details, painting the shooter as an invisible predator who could strike again at any moment. Fear spread far beyond the city, reaching towns and suburbs that had no direct connection to the attack. The fact that someone could plan such an act, execute it, and then disappear without leaving a single trace unsettled even the most skeptical. Ordinary crimes left clues, mistakes, or accidents that could eventually be pieced together. This case was different. It was as if the sniper had walked into a script already written, knowing exactly how every scene would unfold. The more authorities tried to close the net around him, the more elusive he became. Leads fizzled into nothing, surveillance failed to capture his next step, and public pressure mounted. The man in the photographs had now become more than a person of interest. He had become a phantom, a figure whose ability to vanish was as terrifying as the bullet he had fired. Each passing day without answers only deepened the mystery and tightened the grip of fear. Days later, the investigation took a dramatic turn when a burned-out vehicle was discovered in a desolate patch of land far from the city. The car, a dark sedan registered under a false name, was little more than a charred shell, but investigators combing through the wreckage uncovered fragments that would ignite a storm of speculation. Among the ashes lay scraps of paper covered in coded markings, symbols that resembled both military encryption and crude shorthand. Tucked beneath the driver's seat, partially shielded from the fire, was a fake passport bearing the image of a man who looked strikingly similar to the hooded figure in the released photographs. More chilling still was a set of photographs showing multiple public figures, Charlie Kirk among them, each circled in red ink as if part of a larger plan. The media devoured these revelations, and the narrative shifted almost overnight. What had seemed like a single sniper attack now appeared to be connected to something much bigger. Theories spiraled out of control. Some commentators insisted the car was evidence of a covert network operating within the country, perhaps tied to rogue intelligence agents or extremist groups. Others claimed it was an elaborate setup designed to mislead investigators, a stage crafted to give the illusion of conspiracy. The public didn't know what to believe, but the discovery only deepened their fear that the attack was not an isolated act. Analysts within law enforcement began to piece together patterns. The coded notes hinted at meeting points and timelines, though none of them were complete enough to draw definitive conclusions. Experts worked around the clock to decode the symbols, aware that every passing hour might bring the threat of another strike. The fake passport raised its own unsettling questions. Was the man in the photo traveling freely across borders under different names? Had he been operating internationally for years without detection? And if so, how many people had already slipped through the cracks using the same methods? What made the discovery more troubling was the condition of the vehicle itself. The fire appeared deliberate, ignited with accelerants that burned hot enough to destroy most evidence, but controlled enough to ensure certain items survived. Investigators debated whether this was carelessness or a calculated message, a way of showing that whoever was behind the attack had complete control of the narrative. It was as if the burned car had been left behind as a breadcrumb trail, leading law enforcement deeper into a maze designed to confuse them. Public reaction was immediate and volatile. Some people believed the photos in the car confirmed the suspect was part of a planned campaign against political figures. Others saw it as proof that the entire case was being manipulated by hidden powers with agendas of their own. The suspect was no longer imagined as just a man with a rifle, but as a symbol of something larger, an invisible hand capable of orchestrating chaos from the shadows. As the investigation pressed forward, one thing became certain. The sniper case had outgrown its original boundaries. This was no longer the search for one individual, but the unraveling of a web that stretched across borders, politics, and institutions. The hooded man, once thought to be a lone figure fading into the crowd, now appeared to be the key to secrets that could destabilize far more than a single event. The discovery of the car did not bring clarity. Instead, it opened the door to a deeper, more terrifying uncertainty that left everyone wondering just how far the threads of this mystery would reach. Investigators eventually uncovered a breakthrough that would change the course of the case. Fingerprints lifted from the partially burned passport matched those of a man once employed as a military contractor. His name had appeared in classified files, connected to overseas missions that were never fully explained to the public. He had vanished from official records 3 years earlier after being accused of espionage. His last known location listed as a conflict zone thousands of miles away. To the public, he had been a ghost. To those within intelligence circles, his disappearance was whispered about as both a betrayal and a cover-up. Now, his name resurfaced in connection to the sniper case, and the country reeled at the revelation. News outlets wasted no time in amplifying the discovery. Headlines screamed about a trained operative potentially turning rogue, a man once entrusted with national security now re-emerging as a domestic threat. Commentators debated whether he had been abandoned by the very system he once served, or whether he had been operating under new allegiances all along. The narrative of a lone shooter evolved into something far darker. A skilled professional with insider knowledge and a motive hidden beneath layers of secrecy. The idea that such a figure could calmly vanish into the crowd after an attempted assassination left people unsettled in ways the original attack had not. Law enforcement scrambled to piece together his history, but the trail was patchy. Official files were redacted, key details erased or buried under national security restrictions. Leaks soon followed, and they painted a picture of a man used by government agencies for missions no one wanted to admit existed. Whispers of covert assignments, shadow operations, and questionable allegiances swirled around his name. Each new detail blurred the line between suspect and scapegoat. Was he truly the sniper, or was he being framed to shield more powerful interests from exposure? The twist only deepened when investigators discovered that his disappearance 3 years earlier had coincided with the collapse of a secretive intelligence program. The program itself was rumored to have specialized in unconventional warfare and long-range marksmanship, training operatives to operate independently in hostile environments. If the suspect had indeed been part of that program, it meant his skill set was far beyond anything law enforcement had anticipated. He was not just another shooter with military training. He was potentially one of the most dangerous men alive, capable of executing precise attacks while leaving almost no trace behind. Public fear escalated into paranoia. If the government had once employed him, could others like him still be active? If he had turned against his handlers, was this an act of revenge or part of something larger? Theories flourished, ranging from betrayal by his own country to collaboration with foreign intelligence. Nothing felt certain anymore, and that uncertainty fed into a growing sense that the truth would never be revealed in full. By this point, the investigation was no longer confined to the attack itself. It had become entangled in a narrative of secrecy, espionage, and betrayal. The man once known only as a hooded figure in a photograph was now reimagined as a weapon forged in the shadows, his motives concealed beneath layers of classified history. Instead of answers, every discovery only sharpened the mystery, leaving the nation wondering how close they had come to uncovering a truth too dangerous to fully expose. As the nationwide manhunt intensified, investigators turned their focus to a storage locker rented under one of the suspect's known aliases. Hidden away in a quiet industrial district, the unit appeared ordinary from the outside, but what lay within pulled the case into even darker territory. Maps covered the walls, each marked with circles and arrows that pointed to venues, highways, and public gathering spaces. Some dates were scribbled in the margins, though many had already passed, leaving officials to wonder whether they were decoys or if earlier plans had quietly been carried out without detection. On a metal desk sat files filled with surveillance photos of political figures, activists, and even journalists, all organized into folders as if part of a larger dossier. The most disturbing discovery was a sealed envelope resting on top of the desk, addressed directly to federal authorities. Inside was a handwritten letter claiming that the man depicted in the released photos was not the sniper at all, but rather a whistleblower caught in a trap. According to the message, the real shooters belonged to a hidden group with the resources to carry out coordinated attacks. The letter alleged that the storage unit had been deliberately stocked with evidence to frame him, creating a convenient suspect for the public to focus on while the actual perpetrators slipped deeper into the shadows. The handwriting matched samples from the suspect's past, but experts could not agree whether the letter was genuine or a carefully crafted forgery designed to mislead. The revelation shattered any sense of clarity the investigation had achieved. If the letter was authentic, then authorities had been chasing a man who was not the sniper, but a scapegoat left to absorb the fallout. If it was false, then the suspect was manipulating investigators, creating confusion to buy himself more time. Either way, the storage locker suggested that the attack was only one part of a broader, more sophisticated campaign. The possibility of future incidents loomed, and officials tightened security nationwide, bracing for the unknown. Public reactions spiraled into chaos. Some believed the letter and saw the suspect as a betrayed patriot who had tried to expose a conspiracy larger than anyone imagined. Others dismissed it as the desperate excuse of a man caught red-handed. Social media became a battleground of clashing theories, with every new leak or official statement fueling fresh waves of speculation. For many, the truth no longer seemed reachable. The story had grown too tangled in secrecy and manipulation. In the weeks that followed, no definitive answers emerged. The suspect was never captured, and the trail grew colder with each passing day. The released photos, once seen as the key to solving the case, became haunting reminders of questions left unanswered. Was the hooded figure truly the sniper, or was he simply a pawn in a much larger game? Was the letter inside the locker a final attempt to tell the truth, or part of an elaborate deception? The investigation closed without resolution, leaving behind a case that refused to settle. What began as a sniper attack had become a story of shadows, secrecy, and suspicion, a mystery that lingered long after the headlines faded, ensuring that the image of the unknown man would never leave the public's mind.